Okay. And then it saves it. So that's like the benefit is that like it's saved, remote, and but you're welcome to. I can be the one who asks all the good questions.
Yeah, for sure, for
Makes
sure.
any sense.
No, for sure.
We also have another behavioral health workforce expansion program. And that was 10 students got a full scholarship,
Wow.
paid internship,
Mm-hmm.
free laptop. It's like in social work, they can't sweeten the deal anymore.
Yeah,
We never had this stuff.
Yeah, geez, man.
Did you have any of those?
I think we had a few in undergrad, but I work primarily with the master's, so I'm not sure how they're trying to figure that out. But yeah, it seems like a lot of universities are, I don't know what Great Minds is trying to do. It's great money,
It
$30,000.
is amazing money. It's like.
That's crazy. I've never had $30,000.
Right, yeah, yeah. Like we got it as a student loan.
Yeah,
Spent
now I'm paying it back right now.
instantaneously.
Right. Ridiculous.
We also have Sinclair that is asking if we have, you guys probably have that user agreement with them.
Yeah.
And I remember one like 5 years ago. Now I have to search all of my emails to see. Do you guys have one of those with them? Where it's
Well,
like you can do 2 years at Sinclair, then say you do 2 years at OSU, and it'll count just the same.
Yeah, we do have a deal like that with Columbus State.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If they get, I'm not sure what the requirements are, but we do have a pathway program like that with Columbus State.
Okay.
Right now, what we're working on is an agreement with you guys and us. I believe it's Sidney Williams. I'm sure you know who that is.
Yeah.
He said that they have an agreement with the College of Law at OSU.
Okay.
That it's pretty much just like a template that says we offer scholarships to Central State students, just kind of having our little deal in writing. So that's what we're working on with Central, because now we have our HBC alumni scholarship approved and there's money for it. So that's what we're trying to get Central students to take that money because it'll be about $5,000 each semester.
Mm-hmm.
And each semester our program only costs $6,500. So they'd only be responsible. They'd only be responsible for $1,500 each semester.
They have in-state tuition almost. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if I had found it, if I could send it to them. So like it's apparent what the turnover has for people that if you left or somebody quits, if you have high turnover, then nobody knows what went on before.
Yeah,
you got
exactly.
that. And we're even having that as we're on fiscal watch right now.
Okay. What's that really mean?
The state is watching our budget.
Okay.
So we have to get better at reporting things, and we also have to get better at it's mainly in our finance department, but just being accountable essentially.
Sure, yeah.
So it's not a bad thing in my opinion, but I'm sure they would be freaking out, especially over in finance.
Yeah.
They've had a lot of turnover.
Gotcha, yeah.
So
yeah. A lot of hoops to jump through for the state always.
It really is.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to find this. Are you okay presenting to the cloud? If that's
sure.
Would you want a computer to present with also? Does that help you, or do you not need it?
I don't really need it.
Okay.
Honestly, another thing that I can do, I can send you our PowerPoint presentation that we use when I give info sessions.
Okay.
So that way you can just email it to students.
Right,
and
I
say
can.
this is the presentation.
I can. I apologize. This is not
No.
the bang for the buck that you're
I
hoping for.
Promise you it's no problem. I got a good playlist I'm listening to.
Okay.
I get paid to drive.
They give you mileage, hopefully.
Yeah,
I hope
no
they
problem.
give you a hotel if it's more than 150 miles.
Yeah. I was just in Michigan last week for a career fair with them. I stayed for 3 nights, but anything in Ohio, I like to just do my thing and then drive home.
Right.
I like to sleep in my own bed.
Were you planning on doing the 2:30 class also?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, you don't have to.
I was planning on going to grab some lunch.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know where it's a good food place around here?
Well, we are an official food desert
Okay.
But we do have the caf, so the cafeteria
Okay.
should be open, and then there's something underneath the cafeteria in the student center that is a
Okay.
grill, so to speak. And I can
Okay.
introduce you to Dr. Perdomo. He's the chair of our department, and a ton of psychology students are there.
Gotcha.
He has
Okay.
200 psych students.
Wow,
We only
really?
have like 150 social work. He's got 200 psych, and a lot of them
Gotcha.
go to the MSW.
Yeah,
like I did.
Yeah, for
'Cause
sure.
I had no clue. I was one of the dummies.
Well, yeah. Well, if it's alright with you, I'll leave the stuff in here since
Okay.
you're gonna
Yeah.
be back in here at 2:30.
Yes.
And cool. All right.
Yes. And I was going to say, do you want to meet Dr. Perdomo before?
Yeah. That would be
Excuse
great.
me, before we run off.
Yeah, that would definitely be great.
Okay. I want to see if I can. I often like to leave a. We're doing right now. We're like on parenting styles
Okay, what's that mean? Oh, you're learning
for
about parenting styles.
HPSE,
Okay. That's really cool.
and so I want to get you down to Dr. Perdomo and not leave any blank space.
Availability is the best ability, so I push my body to its limit. That's why I sew Dr. Tip. See you.
So how many kids do you have?
This is
There are only 4 styles of parenting. Authoritarian parents demand obedience without considering the child's point of view. Permissive parents are loving but don't exert any control. There are no rules. Authoritative parents are firm but loving. They encourage independence within limits. Neglecting parents are uninvolved and often uninterested in their own child. Recently, a 5th style was proposed, but we will come back to that later. The styles range from controlling and demanding to complete freedom, and from cold and unresponsive to loving and receptive. Each authoritative, permissive, authoritarian, and neglectful parents have their place. To understand what it means to grow up with parents from each end of the spectrum, we can imagine the lives of 4 children. Sarah's parents are authoritarian. They love their girl, but they believe that strict rules are important to make Sarah become well-behaved and fit into society. If Sarah cries, she's told to stop. If she talks back, she is sent to the corner for time out. If she forgets to take care of her chores around the house, she is not allowed to play with her toys. Sarah learns that suppressing her emotions and following her duties is the way to get through the day. To get the love of her parents and to avoid making them upset, she becomes obedient. However, because Sarah was never allowed to decide for herself or follow her intrinsic interests, as an adult, she doesn't know what she really wants. She begins living a life that seems perfect to her parents and society, but might leave her unhappy on the inside. Permissive parents, like those of Peter, enjoy their little boy so much that they believe they should fulfill all his wishes, give him full freedom, and never say no. Peter enjoys full control over his parents and gets whatever he wants. If he doesn't want to walk, he'll be carried. If he wants ice cream he gets. If he wants to play games, he'll be playing them all night. Peter grows up completely without borders and does whatever he thinks is right. He never coped with conflict, and he did not learn to control his emotions. The fact that he always got what he wanted made him a bad loser. As he grows older, he often acts inconsiderate and doesn't know his limits. Arthur's authoritative parents respect their child's needs, but believe that kids need freedom within certain limits. Arthur can freely play, but when he's done, he needs to help tidy up. He is allowed to eat ice cream, but only on Sundays. Screen time is limited to 30 minutes a day. There may be conflict, but the parents listen to what Arthur has to say and then lay down the rules. Arthur learns that some things are difficult, but his parents give him all the support he needs to get through it. He develops the strength to endure hardships and to continue following his interests and passions. In class, he bravely expresses his own opinions in an appropriate manner. During breaks, he can show his emotions and act freely. As an adult, he agrees to rules only after they have been discussed and he feels like he understands them. Neglectful parents are usually not present in their children's life. Nora often feels completely alone in the world. She experiences full freedom to do anything she wants to and has plenty of imagination, but she never receives any feedback or even attention. Nora realizes that it doesn't matter what she does because no one cares anyway. The lack of attention leads to a lack of trust in herself and others. She becomes insecurely attached, unable to form healthy relationships, and develops a negative image of herself. To stop feeling unworthy of love, she tries not to feel anything at all. In recent years, over-involved parents who are present in every aspect of their child's life are often referred to as the fifth style. These parents are also known as snowplows, removing obstacles out of their kids' path, or helicopter parents who hover about and micromanage every aspect of their child's life. Since they won't let their children do anything alone, the children can't learn to overcome challenges by themselves. Research infers that these children don't like to solve difficult problems, lack perseverance, and may even procrastinate in protest when something requires a lot of effort. Since most research on parenting is based on self-reports and was done in the US and Europe, it is not clear how strongly the observed effects will hold up in controlled observational experiments or in other parts of the world. The 4 parenting styles were first introduced by psychologist Diana Baumrind. For good parenting, she advised balance of demandingness and responsiveness. Add to that the wise words of Maria Montessori to never help a child with a task at which he feels he can succeed, and parents should do pretty well. What do you think? Should parents resort to a specific style, or should they decide what's best to do in a given situation, as long as they don't neglect or abuse their child? To download this video without background music and learn more about the topic, visit sproutschools.com. For a free masterclass on attachment parenting, see the link in the description below.
This training aid was developed to help address the clear gap in education and skills evident in the field of substance misuse treatment. One of the main ways people suffering from addiction problems are offered support is through some form of activity in groups. However, professionals who lead these groups all too often don't have a framework to understand how best to use groups. There is an absence of a theoretical model and a lack of understanding of what is likely to be helpful in a group. What you see presented here is influenced strongly by the work of Irvin Yalom and Philip Flores, who have both written extensively on this topic.
Yeah, I've got something I need to bring to the group.
Jimmy, could you go on, please?
It's my mum. She died last year. I used to. I used to care for her. I used to have to give. I used to have to give her a medication. To stop her from being in pain. I used to steal them. Steal them just for a hit.
Thanks for sharing that, Jerry. That's pretty big stuff.
We've all got secrets, mate. I've done stuff and look around lot.
It's not just using me. I was using. None of my family wanted nothing to do with me, except for my granddad. He's the only one I had in contact with. It's pretty old though. He used to send me down to the post office to get his pension every week. And I used to nick the money because I needed to use.
It's just money. This is medication. Medication that actually stopped her from being in pain.
I've stolen from my family. Might not be the same circumstances. I can certainly relate to the feelings of shame and guilt.
How did you cope with it?
Drugs. Heroin. Meth. Just anything.
Come on, you should take this, bro.
Jimmy, this is really brave of you to bring us to group.
Jimmy, do you think you could let the group know what it is about the group today that's allowed you to share this?
The other day, Gemma, she got vulnerable, like, real vulnerable, like. I just felt closer to her. Really close.
I'm wondering if you answered my question there. What was it, do you think, about this group that let you share that?
I don't know really. Maybe it's the trust, like, I sort of trust them. You know, now you all know the real me.
Jimmy, it sounds like you've been holding this in for quite a while. What were you worried about? What were you frightened about if you told the group about this?
I was afraid of. Who's going to respect someone like me? Who's going to respect someone that steals medication off their mum?
Doesn't change the way I feel about it, Jimmy.
That took a lot of guts.
You've done really well to trust them.
What you just done
never see that. It's really great.
Just remember, it wasn't you, Jimmy, it was the edit.
Jimmy, I just think it's great that you managed to get it out there.
During this process, Jimmy is clearly sitting in a lot of discomfort. And when he finally speaks, the rest of the group appear to detect this and give rapt attention. It's clear something different is going on now. Disclosures such as Jimmy's can be fairly common in addiction support groups when there's enough cohesiveness in the group and readiness in the individual to disclose. They can be very powerful agents of change for a number of reasons, but should never be forced. Some clients get the message from certain treatment philosophies that you're only as sick as your secrets, or that unless you expose your shame, it will eat you up and sabotage your recovery. There's actually no evidence to support either of these views. However, if and when people are ready to disclose shameful aspects of themselves, it gives a clear message of trust, which almost always brings the group members closer together by giving others permission to take risks and make further disclosures themselves. There are a number of benefits for the group and for the individual in this. As other group members identify with Jimmy, they also are taking risks and exposing their vulnerability, entering into the circle of trust with him. However, Jimmy seems too wrapped up in his remorse to receive the gifts offered to him at first. But the communication clearly takes the group to a much deeper and more involved level of interaction than previously. Even Mark shows some interpersonal sensitivity with his identification, rather than focusing historically or on the content of the disclosure as Nathan does. Jax takes the opportunity to stimulate the second stage of interpersonal learning, in the here and now. After the first stage, a genuine, emotionally laden interpersonal experience has occurred. The therapist has the opportunity to help the group illuminate the process. In this case, Jax invites what we might call a meta-disclosure, a disclosure about the disclosure, pointing the group into the here and now, inviting them to explore what the event said about the relationships between the people in the group. By asking what allowed him to share his story, Jim is able to highlight how another member of the group has affected him and how he feels towards them as a result. Jax probes further, and Jim is able to highlight how he's developed trust with the members of the group. This will have a tangible effect on the relationships with the other members and on the group as a whole. But by saying, "Now you all know the real me," Jimmy betrays continued feelings of shame. So Tim offers another classic intervention designed to elicit further meta-disclosure by asking what he was afraid would happen if he shared this. Jimmy's then able to identify the root of his shame in the group, that people would reject him, disrespect him. This reveals an even deeper level of intimacy as he shares his fears. However, the feared catastrophe doesn't occur. People are quite clear that, on the contrary, rather than looking down on him for his past actions, they admire and respect his current honesty and courage. When someone realizes that they are not judged by others about historical actions for which they judge themselves, it can be a great help to that person to give up their self-judgment and put those events in the past.
Hello, I am Dr.
People often wonder why we think
I'm
group
professor of
therapy is an
behavioral
ideal
sciences in
form
the
of
Alcohol and Other Drug Studies program at San Diego City College. The AODS program is a fully accredited college-level coursework program that is designed to train students in the required coursework needed to become a certified alcohol and drug counselor in the state of California. Today, I'm going to talk about group counseling in substance use treatment programs. So why group counseling? Overwhelmingly, the majority of the counseling that a client receives while in substance use treatment is group counseling. The minimum California requirement for certified and licensed substance use treatment facilities is that clients receive individual counseling at least once every 30 days, with recognition that once a week is ideal. But depending upon the type of treatment program that the person is in, meaning they could be in an outpatient program or a residential inpatient program, a detox program, clients will receive group counseling somewhere between 3 and 10 sessions per week on average, and more in some programs. So group counseling has been used in clinical settings in the United States since the early 1900s. And some of the rationale for that is that people are born into groups. They're born into family systems. They're also very strongly influenced by groups. Young children learn from watching their parents and their siblings and their society and their culture, and this continues on throughout the lifetime. People are very strongly influenced by the group that they're surrounded by and what the group thinks and what the group's beliefs are. If nothing else, it gives people some measure where they can decide what they actually think compared to what the group is thinking. We also know that groups provide a social model of recovery that includes support and learning from others. What I mean by that is that in a treatment setting, if somebody is in group counseling and they're sharing about their experiences, they may be able to receive support from other people who are in the group who have had similar experiences. They're also able to learn from others as others have worked through things in their own recovery process and their own treatment. That might be something that others may identify with and be able to learn from their peers. Groups can also support healthy behavior better through social reinforcement. So, for example, if somebody was in an outpatient treatment program, they've been there for 17 days, and they bring up in group counseling, there's this new girl, I'm really into her, and I mean, she smokes pot, but I don't know, that's okay. Pot never really was my drug of choice anyway. The group may be able to intervene on that and have a discussion about this, some of the risks versus benefits of doing this, and the group may actually help swing the thought that the person has about whether or not they should be spending time with someone who's actively using drugs while they're in early recovery. Equally, groups can support deviant behavior through social reinforcement. Many people who develop substance use disorders were very strongly influenced by groups of people who encouraged them to continue using substances despite the negative consequences. Additionally, groups are ideal for addressing behaviors, emotions, and interactions in relationship. We will have a lesson later on the interpersonal process group where this will be even more relevant. But suffice it to say that people in substance use treatment often come into treatment with some challenges in terms of their behaviors, how they experience their emotions, and how they interact with other people. And groups is really an ideal setting for addressing that, because unlike a one-on-one individual counseling session where it's a person meeting just with their therapist, in groups there will be plenty of opportunities to interact with others in a relational setting. And a trained facilitator is going to be able to intervene and use that as part of the therapeutic process. So let's just talk about the nuts and bolts of all types of group counseling formats of substance use treatment. The general goals for all substance use disorder treatment groups is to provide education on the symptoms, causes, effects, and treatment of substance use disorders. So with that includes introducing members to recovery concepts, cravings management, relapse prevention strategies, and groups will provide an opportunity to give and receive feedback from peers on their experiences, their attitudes, and their behaviors. Additionally, group therapy and substance use treatment creates an environment where feelings, thoughts, and conflicts can be explored in a safe and supportive environment that doesn't lead to reaching for the drug of choice. Groups are also an ideal place to teach coping skills and to manage substance use and mental health disorders. The AODS 159 co-occurring disorders course in the AODS program goes into much greater detail about helping people with substance use disorders also manage their mental health disorders. But suffice it to say that many people with substance use disorders often have mental health disorders as well. And group is a great place to both teach and practice coping skills to manage both disorders. So examples of this could be practicing these skills in a group setting and then practicing it with peers. For example, if somebody was triggered by another group member and they've learned one coping skill when they're feeling triggered, is to take a deep breath instead of bursting out in anger. And so they can practice that in group. And then when they go outside of a treatment facility, they may be able to practice that with other peers. They can use group to ask for help and support. In group, we can teach them coping skills to resolve relationships and problems that they're having with somebody else who might be in the group. And groups can be used to challenge distorted or addictive thinking. All substance use treatment groups will have norms or rules. So a norm is setting an expectation of what is normal and expected in group. For example, participation is a pretty common group norm, meaning that it is expected that you will participate in the group. You will speak up, you will share, you will be supportive of others. You won't just sit back and watch group as if you're watching a television. Rules set up what you can and cannot do and consequences for the groups. So there may be a rule, for example, that people are not allowed to use their cell phone while they're in a group counseling setting. And if they do use their cell phone, then the first time that they're given the opportunity to put it away, and if they do it a second time, then they have to leave the group. So all groups will have some kind of established norms and rules. Norms and rules can be formal or informal, meaning that the agency might have an actual list of rules and norms that are provided, or this may be discussed in an ad hoc fashion. As things come up in group, there might be an agreement that going forward, this is what's going to be expected of this group. Norms and rules play a really important role in creating a sense of stability, meaning that people know what's expected of them in group. Group creates a certain routine and a type of stable interaction. There are a number of specific types of groups that are used in substance use treatment. So one group in substance use treatment is the support group. In fact, many people experience the support group as their first type of group interaction when they're trying to get sober. Now, support groups exist outside of treatment facilities. So 12-step groups, all the anonymous groups, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Heroin Anonymous, all of these are types of support groups where people get together as peers and give each other support and talk about the process of their own substance use disorder and addiction. Oftentimes, support groups are also included either as part of the actual substance use treatments or as an auxiliary treatment, meaning that there may be an outpatient program where somebody goes to group 3 days a week at the treatment facility. They're expected to also attend, say, 2 support groups outside of treatment facilities and bring back proof that they attended those groups. Many treatment facilities, in fact, probably all or almost all treatment facilities will have some kind of psychoeducational groups. So a psychoeducational group is a group where a lesson is being delivered in some way. They're providing education. So for example, people may learn about the biology of addiction or how drugs and alcohol affect the brain. Substance use treatment facilities have skills development groups. So skills development groups are groups in which you not only learn about a skill, but you have an opportunity to practice that. Many treatment facilities may have an anger management group where people will do scenarios and role play what they might have done based on their own impulse versus what they can do now that they learned a different skill set. Most treatment facilities nowadays have some kind of cognitive behavioral therapy group or dialectical behavioral therapy group. We are not going to talk about these groups in detail in the AODS 160 course, but we do talk about them at much greater length in the AODS 159 co-occurring disorders course. So a CBT or a DBT group is pretty much utilizing the group so that people can learn to change their thinking and learn how to regulate their emotional state. And then there are interpersonal process groups, or sometimes shortened in treatment facilities to just process groups. So process groups are much less structured. Process groups are a place where clients can practice social and emotional learning through their interactions with others. And we will have a lesson on interpersonal process groups by themselves later in the semester. So the appropriate topics for group counseling. When we are running group counseling in a substance use treatment facility, then everything that's talked about in those group settings should at least be loosely related to or directly related to factors that might contribute to why somebody uses substances. So it's substance use treatment. That's the reason why people are in treatment, and that's why we're running the group. So the topics in the group shouldn't be about the latest heat wave that's happening or their prognosis for the upcoming football season. What we want to do is make sure the topics are related in some way to substance use. And primarily, we want people to try and understand why they use substances. Everybody uses substances for a reason. They serve some purpose. And so a very important part of treatments is trying to identify what are those factors that led to somebody using substances. For example, somebody may have had a traumatic experience or multiple traumatic experiences that have caused them to often feel anxiety when they're around other people. And so they may have originally started using, let's say, alcohol because alcohol allowed them to feel more comfortable when they are around other people. So that then becomes associated with the alcohol use and can become a kind of trigger so that every time the person is around other people, they use alcohol to try and deal with their anxiety symptoms. So a topic of discussion like that would be totally appropriate for group. Group topics also should be related to risk factors or triggers and specific plans that relate to relapse prevention. So we want to understand why somebody uses substances in the first place, so then we can try to identify what's going to stop them from using in a problematic way or using altogether when they need treatment. Also, it's appropriate in group to talk about what are commonly referred to as re-entry skills. Many times people that come into substance use treatment have got a lot of other challenges and problems that have developed because of their substance use disorder. So talking about securing housing that is supportive of sobriety. So moving into a sober support home or something versus moving back in, with the ex who's still an active drug user. Employment, addressing employment concerns, updating resumes, how to deal with if an employer asks why you haven't worked for the last 5 years. These are totally appropriate topics in a substance use treatment group because many people are going to be going through the same experience and people might be able to learn from each other and support each other. And then addressing medical factors that might be contributing to substance use treatments. Somebody who has chronic pain and who has been using opiates to treat that may be able to talk with other people who have had a similar experience and talk about alternatives. And of course, developing a stable support system. So when somebody leaves treatment, much like when you first sprain an ankle, you usually might have a brace or some sort of support that you wear as you rehabilitate that ankle. It is pretty much standard canon in substance use treatment that people need to set up a stable, sober support system for when they first leave treatment in order to get past that first 90 days when relapse risk is generally very high post-treatment. All right, let's talk about doing work in group counseling. So in order for any type of group counseling to be therapeutic, the group members must be engaged in work. Now, work is a phrase that I think was first coined by Irv Yalom, who has had a tremendous impact on group counseling in the United States and beyond. We'll learn more about Irv Yalom later on in the semester. Yalom used the phrase work, and that's something that always really resonated with me. And so that'll be the phrase that I use both in this lesson and in subsequent lessons. So the idea is that you're coming to a counseling setting to do work. You're not just filling up time. So the idea isn't like, well, we got 60 minutes together, let's figure out what we can do to get through this. What we want to do is use the time to actually do some work. Now, work may include identifying the presenting issues, the things somebody is struggling with currently in their life. Work may mean gaining education or support in some way. Work may be engaging in problem solving. So taking a presenting issue and then trying to come up with a solution of how to handle that issue. Work may entail practicing new behavioral skills in a group setting that perhaps then you can apply to the outside world. And work is managing the relational dynamics in the group. So anytime you get a group of people together and they're expected to be working in something related to treatment that's causing them distress, that will often trigger relationship dynamics between people that may or may not be nice or pleasant. And so the managing of relationship dynamics in the group is a very important aspect of work in group counseling. With the idea that these skills that you learn in managing the dynamics in the group, you can apply those lessons in the outer world. We'll have a subsequent lesson that goes into much greater detail about that. So the work that the client does in a group setting is a type of treatment goal. And generally, goals that somebody's working on a group should be included on the treatment plan. It should be clear to both the counselor and the client what specifically the client is working on in the group setting. Meaning that maybe one of the things the client is trying to work on in group is identifying what they're feeling at any given moment and having the courage to express that feeling to somebody else. So that would be a completely appropriate goal. And so what we may have on the treatment plan is, client will work on identifying feelings and expressing those feelings in the process group that meets on Monday and Thursday. And then while in group, the counselor or counselors should be really clear on what the client's working on. So, for example, as the group is talking about some kind of a controversial topic, whether or not you should be involved in relationships when you start a relationship when you first leave treatment. Perhaps the client who's working on identifying feelings, might furrow their brow, and the counselor, knowing that that client is working on identifying feelings and expressing them in group, may turn and say, Mariah, I noticed that you had a reaction when James was talking about how he thinks it's not a problem to get involved in relationships when you first leave treatment. Can you talk about what your opinion is on this and what feelings this is bringing up for you? The idea being that counselor and clients are facilitating the treatment goal of identifying feelings. Now, most of the time, it's also usually going to be clear, either explicitly or through interpretation by the other clients in the group, what the person's working on as well. Most of the time, in my experience, it's very helpful when everybody in the group has a sense of what everybody else is working on, because then you can provide support. So it may not be the facilitator who's asking our client what she's feeling. It might be another client saying, hey, I'm wondering what you feel about this. You get the idea. So in a psychoeducational group, the work might be learning a topic, or not a lesion, that was a typo, learning the topic or lesson. I'll fix that. In a skills group, the work might be practicing a new skill, right? For example, in an anger management group. In an interpersonal process group, the work might be learning how to relate with and support other people. So here's the problem. Group members don't often want to do work. Doing work is hard. That's one of the reasons why Yalom called it work, and why I like using that phrase also. It's hard to go to counseling. If you're in counseling and you're working on something that's causing you stress or anxiety or challenges in your life, most people don't want to do things that are hard. And so typically in a group counseling setting, people aren't going to want to do work. They're not going to work on things while they're in group. And so instead what tends to happen is people will withdraw. They just won't speak up, or they won't engage with the topic, or they won't say anything to their peers. Or sometimes people will avoid doing work by filling up the space with words without making any real progress or life changes. And what I mean by filling up the space with words is, facilitator may call on them, we haven't heard anything from you today, like, how are you reacting to the topic? I don't know about the topic. I'm just feeling like really hot, man. Have you noticed how hot it's been lately? It's been so hot and humid. It's really weird. It reminds me of back when I lived in New Orleans. In New Orleans, we always had like fans, and sometimes I'd sleep out in the porch. And this is not doing work in a counseling setting. This is just filling up space with words, and it's not making any real progress or life changes. So most of the time, people will withdraw or fill up space because of treatment ambivalence or treatment resistance, meaning so ambivalence is wanting two opposing things at the same time. So part of them might think that they want treatment, would benefit from treatment, but some other part of them doesn't really want to be in treatment, and they definitely don't want to do work. And then resistance is just a resistance to not wanting to do work related to treatment. So there's lots of ways that people can resist doing work in group. So one way to do that is to talk about things unrelated to substance use or meaningful dialogue. So I just gave an example of somebody talking about heat and humidity and how it relates to living in New Orleans. That might be a totally appropriate topic if you were at a tea party, right, or a social gathering. It is not an appropriate topic when you're in group. So a phrase for when people are talking about things unrelated to treatment might be having a tea party. Another way people avoid doing work in group is by telling war stories about the past that are not relevant to current treatment goals. So it is possible to talk about experiences that you've had in the past that are related to current treatment goals. If somebody were to say, man, I'm just really having a hard time, with this. I go through treatment, I can do treatment, but like every time I just relapse as soon as I get out. It's like, the last time I was here, I thought it was really good. I got a sponsor, and then I relapsed 3 weeks after I left treatment. I'm really struggling with, why I can't stay sober when I leave treatment. Now that's telling something about past experiences related to substance use that might be relevant to the current treatment goal. Developing an appropriate relapse prevention plan and a sober support system to stay sober in those critical days of early recovery. But there's other people who will go to group and they'll just fill up time talking about something that's not really relevant. Like, oh yeah, man, back when I was in my addiction, I'd be on a 20-day bender of just using crank, and I would be so focused on cleaning, and I'd get the toothbrush out. And I remember one time I was totally up in the corners of my ceiling, and I was cleaning out, the corners with the toothbrush, and there were spiders up there. And so this would be an example of somebody telling a story that really doesn't have anything to do with the current treatment goals. So very easy to misinterpret this. In fact, sometimes the beginning or untrained facilitator might feel like, oh, wow, my group's really talking about a lot of things. We're having a really good group. So the key question to go back to again is, are we actually doing work? Another way to avoid doing work in group is to focus on the others in the group and try and fix their problems. So if I'm ambivalent about being in group, I'm ambivalent about being in substance use treatment, and somebody in the group brings up that they're having marital problems, with their spouse, I may decide that a really good way to kill time in group is to really focus on that person and talk about what they should be doing and how they should do this and that, and I'll give them lots of advice, and everybody piles on, and we all start trying to fix somebody else's problems. We're always an expert when it comes to fixing somebody else's problem, and it's a convenient thing to do when we don't really want to talk about what's going on with us. So we'll talk more about fix-it groups in a subsequent lesson as well. Fix-it groups are a classic defense mechanism to avoid working on myself. Generating or participating in interpersonal conflicts without taking personal responsibility for their role. So again, as mentioned earlier, group can be really super helpful for learning how to manage relational dynamics. And by working through things, learning how to assert ourselves in group, working through conflict resolution, learning how to set boundaries with others in group, those are all appropriate treatment goals and all appropriate work. But a lot of times what will happen in group is, people just develop some kind of a conflict and man, who are you? You're such a know-it-all. Why you always got an answer to everything? And then the person sitting next to me is like, yeah, man, God, I'm sick of hearing from you. And then the other person's like, yeah, well, fuck you, man. This is what I thought group was all about. And somebody else is like, whoa, why do you gotta swear? That's not right. And now we got all this conflict going on. But nobody's actually doing anything about this. Nobody's taking responsibility for their role in that. Nobody is evaluating why they felt so triggered when somebody used a swear word. Nobody's trying to actually set up an appropriate boundary or use an I statement to make a request. All those things are examples of how you might turn an interpersonal conflict into work and be able to do something about that. But many times you'll see people avoiding doing work by just creating conflicts. I don't like her, and I don't know why. Okay. And then obviously one way to avoid doing work is simply either directly or indirectly refusing to participate. So So that often happens too, right? Person sitting there, pulling out their phone, staring at the clock, like obviously not wanting to be there. And when they're called upon, they refuse to participate. That's definitely no work either. So one of the key things, whatever group you are running in a substance use treatment facility, is to make sure that the group gets back on track. So when the group is off track and they're not doing work using one of the things that we just talked about, this will most often require the facilitator to step in and help to get the group back on track and focused on doing work. This is true for all of the groups. So if somebody's running a psychoeducational group and the lesson of the day, somebody raises their hand and like, yeah, I relate to that. And then they start talking about something that has nothing to do with the lesson, and 3 or 4 more people are now talking about that. And now we got somebody telling war stories. Then the facilitator may need to cut in and say, okay, hold on everybody. I really appreciate all the sharing that everybody's doing, but we've kind of gotten off our agenda, which is to go back and talk about relapse prevention today in this group. So let's go back to talk about that. In an interpersonal process group, we may have a fix-it group developing, and the facilitator might say, I'm noticing everybody's working really hard at giving Serena advice, but I'm wondering if instead we can focus on using I statements and talking about how we identify with what Serena's going through, and if you've had any experience with addressing this issue, how have you handled it in the past? So these would be examples of the facilitator stepping in to get group back on track. Now, note that sometimes group members may be able to redirect the group themselves. A really high-functioning group, this will often happen, or if the group has a senior member, somebody who's been in the group for a while, maybe is a little further in their own recovery process, they may step in themselves to say, guys, this doesn't have anything to do with what we were talking about, and I really want to hear the lesson. But ultimately, it's the facilitator's responsibility and role to make sure that the group is on track. All right, let's talk about some basic group facilitator skills. So the following are some of the basic skills that you need in order to facilitate a group. So one is setting the agenda and the objectives for the group, meaning that the facilitator needs to have an understanding of why this group is meeting, what the purpose of the group is, and ultimately what we hope to get out of today's group. A facilitator also uses gatekeeping skills to direct the flow of discussion and conversation. Gatekeeping is a phrase that basically means controlling who can speak at any given time, making platforms for other people to speak. I like to think of gatekeeping in some ways as like the traffic police person when the traffic light is out. And he or she is standing out there saying, okay, wait, you guys wait. And then they're pointing in this direction. They're saying, you come this way, like keep coming, okay, wait. Okay, now you all can come here. That's an example of gatekeeping, and a facilitator will have to do that in group. So Mario, I'd like to hear more from you on this topic. We haven't heard anything from you today. Yes, Gavin, that's really, I really appreciate the share. Before you head off in that direction, though, I'd like to keep us on track and hear from some of the other people who've raised their hands. So that's an example of using gatekeeping. Very important skill. Encouraging participation by all members. If somebody is in a group in a treatment facility, then they're in treatment. And the expectation is that all the members who are participating in group counseling actually participate in group counseling. Now, again, one of the great ways to avoid doing work is simply to not participate. And if the group has a big talker or a couple of big talkers who tend to dominate the group, and every single time the group gets together, it's the same 3 or 4 people who are talking, then the facilitator is going to have to encourage participation by all the members, usually using gatekeeping skills, where it may be something like, okay, I'd like to hear from some of the people we don't usually hear from today. So I'm going to call on Roberta. So that would be making sure that Roberta gets a chance to participate. Using active and reflecting listening to ensure that members feel heard and understood. We will have a subsequent lesson on active and reflective listening, but essentially it's reflecting back what somebody just said to make sure they feel heard. So it may be something like saying, so Letitia, what I think I'm hearing you say is, if you repeat back what she said, do I have that right? Letitia said, yeah, exactly. Okay, got it. That's actually a really good question. Let's put that out to the group. Interrupting, summarizing, and redirecting when a group member is dominating the discussion. Interrupting is one of the basic foundational skills of facilitating group. If we can't interrupt somebody, the group will often get off track. So for people who are shy or have been conditioned by their own society that you should never interrupt people because it's rude, that's something that you will need to work through when you're doing work as a group counselor. And there is a way to gracefully interrupt, which we'll talk about in a subsequent lesson as well. Maintaining and enforcing, when necessary, the group norms and rules, making sure everybody understands what's expected of them. Redirecting topics towards substance use and recovery, or factors that may contribute to substance use when the group gets off track. Reframing you statements and advice giving or the fix-it group to encourage clients to focus on themselves and their own process. So how does this relate to your recovery? And identifying and encouraging the active practice of different or alternative behaviors. Other facilitating skills include using motivational interviewing and other solution-based techniques to evoke change, to help people identify their own solutions and to encourage personal reflections. Providing in-the-moment psychoeducation that can be applied to the situation, general treatment or recovery process. What I mean by that is that you aren't only providing psychoeducation in a psychoeducation group. So somebody, you might be running, say, an interpersonal process group, and somebody brings up a topic and they say, yeah, well, marijuana is legal in the state of California, so I don't see why that's a problem. If I smoke pot when I leave, at least I'm not using heroin. And somebody else says, yeah, like, and pot's not even addictive. Like, I heard that from somebody. Then you might have an opportunity to step in and say, well, okay, so hold on for just a second. Marijuana is legal in the state of California, the same way that alcohol is legal in the state of California. However, both alcohol and marijuana are both addictive. They both, after repeated use, will create tolerance. They each have withdrawal symptoms, yada, yada, yada. You start to explain the process. So that's taking a moment of psychoeducation before the group gets back on track. All right. And then it's up to the facilitator to create opportunities to practice new skills in the group setting. So this may be done in a skills group where that's actually part of the agenda for the group is to learn a skill and then to practice that skill in the group. But this also could be done in any group. So maybe it is a DBT or dialectical behavioral therapy group, and the group is starting to get really agitated and upset because they think some new rule that the facility has implemented is unfair. And so the facilitator may step in and say, wow, I'm noticing a lot of people are starting to get really elevated and upset and angry. This might actually be a good time for us to practice that deep breathing technique that we talked about last week and see how that impacts your emotional state right now. So let's all do this. Let's practice the deep breathing. And so that's creating an opportunity to practice a new skill. Okay. Some other leader skills that you will use in group settings is ensuring emotional safety. Group only works when people feel safe enough to share and express. Stimulating communication and emotional expression. Resolving ethical issues that may come up in group. Resolving ethical issues may be something like, for example, somebody is expressing or thinking of hurting themselves. That's an ethical issue. There's a requirement in California that substance use counselors act on that statement, follow up to determine if the person is thinking of hurting themselves, if they have the plans and needs to do so, and then reporting that when necessary. Addressing disruptive behavior as it comes up in group. Adjusting your style to the needs of the group. That's a very important skill. Your style may be your style may be very dramatic. You're a very high energy facilitator. Sometimes you even like to step up out of your chair and stride in the middle of the group, and you're like, yeah, I'm really excited about what's happening here in group, like what's going on right now. High fives, from the group. I mean, that might be a style that you have, but, while somebody is talking about a very somber experience, maybe they've got the put their dog down because their dog has, cancer and other people are feeling really triggered, that would not be the time to use an overly energetic style in the group. So you'll need to adjust your style depending upon the particular group. Knowing when to be silent. We'll talk a bit more about this also a little later on the semester. So the use of the pregnant pause, or knowing when by not saying something, you might actually end up creating a more therapeutic process for the people in group. And avoid taking on outside of group roles or dual relationships. This is talked a lot about in the AODS 154, the Law and Ethics course in the AODS program, but the importance of understanding what your role is as the facilitator, as the substance use counselor, and not trying to take on other roles, like becoming the client's friends, going outside in the smoking circle and, BSing with them in a way that, makes you no longer in the counselor role, or you try to sell them, something from this new job venture you're starting. So avoiding outside of the group roles. Okay, so client reveals, counselor listens, hopefully in the middle of that is understanding. The last skill I want to touch upon is the importance of empathy as the foundational skill, meaning that all of the other skills that you learn in the ODS program, the most important one is to have empathy. So there is lots of research that indicates that empathy is the most important counselor skill. And empathy in substance use treatment means that you have to have the desire and the willingness to work with people who are not always very well behaved, who are nice to be around. People who are in drug treatment and alcohol treatment are often coming there and they're a mess. Their lives are a mess. Their emotional state is a mess. They're upset, they're craving, they're ambivalent, they don't want to be there. And sometimes that means that, they're not necessarily very nice. And so we have to be able to understand, man, I get it. I know where you're at. I feel your pain. I understand. I feel empathy. It also means that you make a concerted effort to understand the client's actions and point of view, even when they're being difficult, confrontational, or highly resistant. So if a client, for example, suddenly is shouting at you about how you're such a horrible counselor and you don't know what the hell you're doing, in the outside world, when you're not wearing the clinical counselor hat, you may respond in a defensive way. Hey man, why are you talking to me that way? I've been to school, I know what I'm doing. Whereas in a substance use treatment facility, it's very important to say okay, so it sounds like you're really upset with me, and I really want to try and understand what's going on. What was it that I said or did that's making you feel as if I don't know what it is that I'm doing? So there are numerous studies out there showing that an empathetic counselor improves treatment outcomes, both in treatment and beyond treatment. There's a nice, cute little YouTube video by Brene Brown on empathy, and that YouTube link right there. I'm not going to play it for you right now because unfortunately I get blocked by Zoom if I try to play the YouTube video through the link there. I've got to do something different. There's also a very famous study that was done in 1993 where they took a number of people in substance use treatment and they randomly placed them in two types of treatment. So the client either got assigned to counselors that were using a very client-centered, empathetic style, trying to understand where the person's coming from, or they got very directive, confrontational things like, look, you just need to admit to yourself you're an addict. Until you admit yourself to yourself that you're an addict and you completely screwed up your family life, then you're not going to get any better. What they found was when somebody was assigned to the confrontational counseling, it tended to increase their substance use. In fact, it increased even more than when they first came into treatment. So the more confrontational the type of treatment that people received, the more they drank. Whereas the people that got client-centered empathetic counseling tended to stay in the treatment, finish the treatment, and stayed sober for longer after they left treatment. All right, so that takes us to the end of our introductory lesson in group counseling. There's a couple of cute little cartoons here. The Christmas group therapy in the upper left-hand corner. Santa doesn't believe in himself. Snowman thinks he's bipolar. All the other reindeers laughing, call me names. Elf is trapped in a dead-end job. Interrupters Anonymous. Hi, my name is Timmy, and hello, my name is, and hi, my name is Interrupters Anonymous. And then the Halloween group therapy that's listed down there on the bottom. So I hope this lesson has provided you with a good initial overview of the group process and substance use treatment. And as I mentioned a couple of times, subsequent lessons will get into more detail about a number of the other types of group counseling skills that we'll be working on this semester. All right, so until next time.
Hello, I am Dr. Keith Burke. I am a professor of behavioral sciences in the Alcohol and Other Drug Studies program at San Diego City College. The AODS program is a comprehensive training program for students who are studying to sit for the certification exam to be a certified alcohol and drug counselor in the state of California. Today, I am going to talk about counseling techniques when running an interpersonal process group. The interpersonal process group is a specific kind of counseling group. It is distinct from a psychoeducational group or a skills development group or even a support group. The interpersonal process group is based on some specific techniques of using the power of the group to get people in the group to interact with each other. So the overall goals and purposes of an interpersonal process group is to get the group members to work on real issues in their life, to increase awareness, to improve life skills, to engage in problem solving, and to build community support. And the goal for the interpersonal process group is to primarily do this by interacting with other group members. Now, this is a mistake that a lot of untrained early facilitators make when running an interpersonal process group.
We have an MSW recruiter here today. Are you leading your group?
Huh?
You're not leading your group, are you?
No, I'm just here for the.
Oh, for the MSW
Yeah.
recruiter, right? She'll be here. Let me stop this because I guess it is 15. Stop this and start it again.